Welcome back to From the State House with Massachusetts State Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr. And Senator Tarr, welcome back. And finally, happy summer.
Well, thanks, Rick. There's still a rumor that summer is coming. So I think we may have saw some previews over the last couple of days on the 3rd and the 4th of July. And you were talking with me off air about how we were lucky to get some of the parades in. You and I were both at the Gloucester parade, which could have easily been threatened by rain, but we were able to get it in. Rockport, the rain miraculously stopped just in time to allow us to get set up to be in the parade. And Manchester still was able to go, although there was a little bit of rain there. So it's been an interesting couple of days, Rick, for folks who plan parades or who participate in them.
I know you went to a big breakfast on Friday or Saturday or something like that in support of a local community. And then on the 3rd, on Tuesday, I saw you out there running half a marathon in the Gloucester Parade. What was it like in terms of crowd participation, Senator, in the three communities you were at?
So the breakfast you're referring to, Rick, is called the Red, White, and Blue Breakfast, and it's run by the Manchester Essex Rotary Club at the Tux Point Chowder House, and it has been going on for years, at least a couple of decades, and probably closer to 3 or 4 decades. And it is a fundraiser for the Rotary Club, which then gives out scholarships and supports the parade committee in Manchester by the Sea. And it was a very good turnout. There was somewhere around 12 or 1,300, maybe even 1,400 people who came to that breakfast, Rick, and it was great. I had the opportunity there to be flipping pancakes with my friend and former legislative colleague, Brad Hill, who was in the House. And it was just a good crowd and good spirit. And at all of the parades, Rick, on Cape Ann, we saw great crowds. And I was thinking, particularly with the Rockport parade, where it rained pretty close to the start of the parade, that we might see diminished crowds along the way. That wasn't the case at all. It was as if it hadn't rained. There were folks out, there were a lot of floats. So good participation and good audience engagement along the parade routes. So it was actually good. And I think, Rick, a nice contrast to what we had to live with during the days of the pandemic when we couldn't have such gatherings.
I was just going to mention that. It seems to me we're still in a pre-COVID celebration, and I don't want to liken it to post-World War II, but in a sense, it has that kind of feel to it. Is that we got out of this, we're still here, businesses coming back online, and so on, and people want to get back to the annual celebrations that we've always had.
I really feel that. I think folks were eager to get out and celebrate the birth of our nation and do it in the traditional kind of ways. So whether it be the red, white, and blue breakfast or the 4th of July parades. And it's going to continue because the fireworks, as you know, and the concert on the Gloucester Boulevard got postponed until Saturday. And so it's going to roll right into the weekend. And I think that's fantastic. And also, Rick, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because you and I have talked about this in the past, that the international dory races had gotten moved this year, and they're actually going to be on Saturday from Maritime Gloucester. And this will be the 71st year that Gloucester and Lunenburg have competed in those international dory races. So I would encourage folks to come down to Maritime Gloucester at 10 a.m. And I guarantee you will enjoy this friendly competition between sister communities.
Yeah, we have a post up and in the news. There's a lot going on in Gloucester, sponsored by Maritime Gloucester from Thursday through Sunday, and it's sort of like a mini schooner festival almost. So I'm glad you brought that up. Lots to talk about, Senator, and I guess we should start with the budget. We talked about it a week or so ago, and the fact that there was a supplemental budget to carry us over while the fiscal 24 budget is still in the works. What's the update on that?
So, Rick, I'm glad that we passed that interim budget, that 1/12 budget, because it will ensure that state government continues to operate and we won't miss a beat with regard to meeting our obligations. But at the same time, we need to make sure we get a budget done. And as you know, the budget, the fiscal year is in July 1st is the beginning of the fiscal year. So we are now in fiscal year 2024, but we do not have a budget for the whole year. And we're now one of about 6 states that are in that situation across the country. And we are hoping to get a resolution to the 2 different bills coming from the conference committee very shortly. And it's time. We need to bring this to closure. We need to get a budget in place, and we need to be able to move on with other business. But as you know, those 6 people that are on the conference committee have a very difficult task, and there are some significant differences, not only in spending, but also in matters of policy between the House and the Senate versions of the budget. So there's still some work to be done here, and I wish I could predict for you that it will be resolved in the next couple of days. I don't think that's going to be the case. I would love to be pleasantly surprised. I think it's going to take a while, but my hope is that this will get to the governor's desk fairly quickly so that we don't remain an outlier among states without a budget for the fiscal year that we are now in.
Is there a major bone of contention that you could let us know about, or why? What's the holdup?
Well, it's hard to identify what the particular obstacles are to agreement, but there are significant policy differences. One of the things that's different is the Senate's approach to free college, community college tuition for a significant percentage of the population. The House does not take the same approach with regard to that issue. There are large differences in spending in different accounts. In some of those accounts, the Senate spends more money, and some the House spends more money, and those things have to be reconciled into a final budget document. So right now, Rick, I can't point to any one thing and say this is what's holding us up, but there are significant differences. Another one is how we spend the proceeds from the millionaires tax. Both branches set up a trust fund to put those dollars in, which is important to accountability so that we can ensure that they go to the purposes that they were intended to be used for, particularly given the pronouncements of the proponents of that tax. But there are radical differences between the House and the Senate as to how those dollars get spent. And we're talking about roughly $1 billion, so it is not insignificant. And so, Rick, there are a number of things yet to be resolved, and my hope is that the committee will do its work efficiently. It will continue to be thoughtful, notwithstanding the fact that we are now into the new fiscal year, and we'll get a budget that we can all live with and is workable for everyone in the Commonwealth.
Well, what's the next milestone for the budget in terms of timeline?
So the next thing that needs to happen is a conference committee report, hopefully, will come from the conference committee, and that is the final bill on this subject. And the conference committee report has to be accepted by the House and by the Senate. And that's a very interesting vote, Rick, because you only get one vote. You can't say, I don't like this part of the report, or maybe I don't like this part. You have to choose. Either you support the report or you don't. So each branch has to accept the conference committee report, and then there's a final vote on enactment. So the House has to enact the final bill, then the Senate has to enact the final bill. Then it goes to the governor's desk, and she will have 10 days to look at the bill. And as we know, Massachusetts is unique in some ways in that the governor has a line item veto. So the governor can line out particular parts of that budget. She can make changes and send them back. So we've got a ways to go yet before this process is final.
Okay. All right. So stay tuned to that. Big story in Boston starting today, July 5, the closing of the Sumner Tunnel. And I remember when the big dig was going to solve all of Boston's traffic problems. So what's your view on all of that?
Well, you know, Rick, transportation infrastructure can be a vexing thing because it needs to be kept in a state of good repair, because when it isn't, we've seen lots of reports in the media about catastrophic failures of bridges and tunnels and other kinds of things. So the infrastructure has to be repaired. The difficulty is that in many cases, such as this one, it has to be closed to be repaired, to be done safely. And so it's going to be a major hardship for a lot of folks commuting in and out of Boston, but it's something that has to happen in order for those repairs to be properly completed. So I think we're going to face a difficult situation for commuting over the next several months. The tunnel closed at midnight last night, and the closure is expected to go for quite a while. However, there are some measures that are being undertaken to mitigate congestion, and we'll be posting some of this material, Rick, over the next couple of days so that folks can see a lot of the things that I'm going to describe in greater detail. But one of the most significant things is that the fare for the commuter rail on the Newburyport-Rockport line is going to drop to $2.40, which is a significant discount. In addition to that, there's going to be increased ferry service There has been a ferry running in Salem. There will now be one in Lynn, one in Winthrop. And so there will be additional ferry service. And again, more information that we'll be posting relative to alternatives. And one of the things that the administration has been very vocal about is, if you can, try to find an alternative to driving. And the Healy-Driscoll administration is working to make some more of those alternatives available. So we'll be posting that information, and we'll be keeping you posted as well, so that folks know that there are ways to try to make this less painful than it otherwise would be.
Yeah, I feel bad, but I smile, Senator, because I know you're pro's pro, and it's got to be sometimes difficult to say the Healy-Driscoll administration when you had Baker Polito for so long. I mean, it's just a natural thing, isn't it? And you got to think about it.
It's a bit like writing a check on January 1st when you have to change the year in the corner. but
Exactly.
you know, we will all adapt, and the governor deserves our respect and our recognition. And Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll are faced with a major challenge with this one, and they're trying to work their way through it. And it's in our best interest for them to succeed. So I think we all have to understand the situation, explore the alternatives, and do the best we can to help ourselves make the situation less bad using the tools that are being made available.
And from a different perspective, first of all, I think commuters, it's easy for me to say, have got to practice patience. They have to be more patient than ever, I would think. But also, I would think employers have to be patient as well, because it's going to, I would imagine, place a hardship on a lot of staff members.
There's no doubt about it. And one of the things that'll be interesting to see is how this plays out in the context of the situation where we have a lot more folks working remotely, or a lot more folks work in a hybrid schedule where they're coming into an office in Boston some days of the week, but not all days of the week. So it'll be interesting to see how employers use those tools to try to also help mitigate the situation. But you said the most important word, Rick. It's going to take patience no matter what. There is no perfect solution here. When you shut down a major transportation venue, it is going to have an impact. And we all have to be patient, because the price of that, or the benefit of that, is having a Sumner tunnel that we know is safe and efficient. And that makes a big difference.
Well, and it can be done. It happened in Philadelphia. They had a drastic movement there in '95, and they fixed that, and things worked well. You teased a couple of weeks ago, Senator, as we get to our final topic here, something about right whales. And I'm asking you again now, what's this all about?
So, Rick, I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but the northern right whale is an endangered species. There are fewer than 400 of them in existence, and they tend to migrate along the east coast of the United States. They come to New England as the spring approaches and as we get into summer. And in fact, there's often a very high concentration of right whales in Massachusetts Bay during particularly the late winter and the spring months. And as a result of that, we have a special obligation to be able to try to prevent harm to the right whale. And that can happen in a couple of ways. It can happen with vessel strikes, or it can happen with entanglement with fishing gear. And I think it's important to point out that our fishing industry, particularly our lobster industry, is working incredibly hard to protect the right whale. And in fact, the sacrifices that our commercial fishing industry are making are extremely significant. I would argue they're doing more than anyone else to protect the right whale, including, Rick, 5 months out of that late winter and spring season when Massachusetts lobster fishers cannot have gear in the water. 5 months when they cannot work to be able to make sure that we protect the right whale. That is a very significant sacrifice. But in order to help them do that, last year, when we were debating the budget that is now concluded, for the fiscal year that's now concluded, I worked with my colleagues and the chair of the Committee on Ways and Means, and I was able to insert in the budget dollars for a grant program to help lobster harvesters purchase gear that protects the right whale. And primarily that comes in the form of rope for the trawls by which you haul the traps, that breaks at a strength that is significant and important to allow a whale to escape entanglement. There are also links that can be put into the line that look like almost like a reverse Chinese finger trap, where it pulls apart when there's tension placed on it, and also buoys that are important to protecting the right whale. It's incumbent on us, Rick, to try to help our lobster industry, which is making so much sacrifice, be able to have the gear that it needs to be able to do the job. And so I am pleased to report that as a result of the money that we put into the budget, and as a result of a report that I got last week from DMF Director Dan McKiernan, all of those dollars are out the door and grants have been made. And there are a lot of lobster harvesters across Massachusetts that now are able to afford the gear that can help them do their job to protect the right whale. All of the dollars are out the door, the gear is being purchased, and it will be another major step to protect the right whale.
I do remember when you were talking about that as a plan, and now it's come to fruition. That's terrific. Senator, anything else you might want to mention in this first week in July?
Just as another tease, Rick, we put into the budget for the coming fiscal year, into the Senate version of the budget, money for the Massachusetts Environmental Police to do what are known as directed patrols, so that when right whales are detected in our waters, the environmental police respond to the area and do their best to prevent unintended consequences of vessel strikes, letting people know the whales are there, setting up a perimeter, and adding another tool to the toolbox. So, Rick, hopefully when that final conference committee report is issued, I'm going to be able to tell you that those dollars are in the budget for this year, and we'll be doing even more to protect the right whale.